Hello friends, today we are going to discuss a very crucial topic on which the auditor's opinion is based. In second term, I would say it is the crux of any audit assignment. So the topics covered would be what is an audit evidence, types of audit evidences, and methods of collecting audit evidences. Let me begin with what is an audit evidence. Understand this better with an example. I have Messrs. Week over here who has appointed Mr. Intelligent to be their auditor for the financial year 11-12. Now as an auditor, we all know that we need to comment upon the internal controls of a firm. So Mr. Intelligent evaluated the balance confirmation process of Messrs. Week. So what he did was, he checked the balances existing in the debtors account on the 31st of March and he checked the dispatch notes of the letters sent to the debtors. So when the numbers were compared, we had confirmation sent only to 5 out of 10 debtors. So these dispatch notes, 5 dispatch notes served as his audit evidence. That means he could conclude that the audit procedure of balance confirmation that was required to be done was not done in accordance, and hence there was a weak internal control. So SA 500, formulated by Auditing and Assurance Standard Board of ICAI, states that audit evidences are the information to be used by the auditor in arriving at a conclusion. Now these information could be accounting information and other information. Now the term used as accounting information in the definition means the information derived by the auditor from the accounting systems, from accounting data and information and other documents. When the debtors account was evaluated, when the books of accounts were searched for, the audit evidences collected by the auditor from these documents was the accounting information. When we talk of other information, I'm actually talking of the internal control, the visual audit evidences that is collected by him. So when an auditor in any organization goes about evaluating how the company's employees are performing, how are the controls in an organization, it is that the other information mentioned in the definition. As far as other information mentioned in the definition, we are referring to the information collected by the auditors while evaluating the internal control processes. So in our example, the information, the audit evidence that the internal procedure of balance confirmation was not carried out adequately by Messrs. Week was the other information collected by Mr. Intelligent. So after having understood what is an audit evidence, we will now study types of audit evidences. So the major classification of audit evidences would be depending upon its nature and the other depending upon the source. Let us begin with depending upon the nature. So when I'm talking of nature, I mean the methods and the way from. So when I'm talking of nature, I generally mean the modes through which the audit evidences were collected. So depending upon the nature, we have 3 major classifications. We have the visual, we have the documentary, and the oral audit evidences. Visual could generally mean audit evidences collected by the auditor on its own. Visual audit evidences generally means audit evidences collected by the auditor by his own observation. For example, evidences collected about the internal control would be falling in the visual category. Major of the audit evidences that an auditor has for evaluation and to perform the analytical procedures would be documentary in nature. Documentary audit evidences of course includes the papers, the documents, the records, the legal acts and everything that is the auditor is referring to throughout the audit. So major portion of the audit evidences comes in this category. Oral audit evidences are collected by way of doing an inquiry or having a one-on-one conversation either with the employees or with the management or with the third party about the entity. Now we come down to depending upon the source. Depending upon the source would be internal and external. Internal, as the word suggests, are the audit evidences that are generated within the entity. So debtors account, creditors account, details about the fixed assets that is provided to the auditors from the management or the employees of the company are the internal audit evidences. External generally comes from the third party. That is, the audit evidences collected from a person outside the entity would fall in the external audit evidences. Let me elaborate this for you. So the general notion is the external audit evidences obtained by the auditors are more reliable than the internal ones. However, auditors cannot go out of the way. There has to be a balance between the cost and the benefit of the audit evidences obtained. So all the evidences cannot come from external source for sure. Now what is coming from external source and how reliable it is also depends upon a lot of factors. Say for example, I am obtaining an audit evidence from the third party. But what if the third party's internal controls are weak? What if the management of the third party is not very serious? In that scenario, for me to rely upon the third party confirmation would also stand in question. Now let us come down to depending upon the nature. So documentary or evidences, of course being the major portion, are more reliable as compared to the oral confirmation or the oral inquiries that are done with the employees or the management. So these audit evidences, for the auditor to rely upon them to form an audit opinion, should be sufficient and appropriate in nature. I'm sure a lot of you guys must have heard these words, that the audit evidences should be sufficient and appropriate. Now sufficiency generally depends upon the quantity. That means the quantum of the audit evidences. Now if I want to evaluate a debtor's account holding a balance of 100 lakhs, I would at least obtain evidences about the 50 lakhs. So the sufficiency generally dealing with the quantity, appropriateness deals with the quality of audit evidences. Let me give you some examples. These are generally accepted norms by people, that the original documents are more reliable than the photocopy. Audit documentary or evidences are more reliable than the oral ones. Similarly, the external documents or the external confirmation obtained are more reliable than the internal ones. So the auditor has to be rest assured that the audit evidences, either of the way collected by him, should be sufficient and appropriate in nature. Why? To give him a reasonable assurance that the financial statements are not misstated, that all the material items of the assets, liabilities, revenue and expenditure are included in the financial statements, and that it depicts a perfect picture. After having known what are our audit evidences and types of audit evidences, we are going to now discuss methods of collecting these audit evidences. So here I have 6 major methods of collecting audit evidences. Let us understand each one of them in detail. So I begin with inspection. Now what is an inspection? Inspection is the audit procedure performed by the auditor on the documents, records and the statements received by him. So generally what the auditor deals with, or generally the calculation that the auditors perform, could be falling under in this category. However, inspection cannot be the only audit procedure. For example, now if I have to evaluate the stock existing with the company, I would refer the stock register. So me referring to the stock register would be an act of inspection. I would inspect the stock register, but does that in any way promise me about the ownership or gives me a reasonable assurance about the ownership of the stocks? It does not. So along with inspection, I have to resume to observation. I'll have to go down to the observation. So auditors going with the company's personnel to check about the procedures of counting inventory at the year end could be the observation part of it. So inspection generally deals with the books and the records. Observation would be observing the visual method of collecting audit evidences by the auditor. Now we come up to external confirmation. SA 505 as formulated by the AASB, Auditing and Assurance Standard Board. What does it state? That the external confirmation has to be obtained in certain scenarios where the auditors deems fit, where it is the auditor's idea or his experience states that a particular item of the financials needs an external party confirmation, he would resort to this method of collecting audit evidences. But as we have discussed earlier, external confirmation and auditor needs to have a balance between the cost and the benefit. That means, for example, if I want to have an external confirmation of say 1000 rupees, and if I'll end up spending 200 rupees just to obtaining that external confirmation, this will not serve the audit purpose. Audit evidences obtained through external confirmation are also to be evaluated from the point of view of the third party, which means that an auditor should actually look into that the management of the third party or the internal control of the third party are such that the details obtained from them are reliable enough. Now let's move on to recalculation and reperformance. Recalculation generally refers to checking the mathematical accuracy of the financials, while reperformance means performing the procedures of the client by the auditor himself. Recalculation gives him the assurance regarding the mathematical accuracy. Now, if I want to be sure that the debtor's balance that's given to me by my client is correct, I would take his account, add up the debits minus the credit and arrive at a balance. That recalculation is then compared with the details given by the client, and then the audit conclusion is arrived at. Reperformance, on the other hand, as I said, could be reperforming of the procedures to know about the accuracy of the internal control, the expedition of the client, and the overall management of the company. Inquiries as a method of collection of audit evidences is used extensively throughout the audit. Inquiries could be with the employees, from the follow auditors in case of a joint assignment, could be with the management, and also at times from the third party. Inquiries enable the auditors to have a large part of audit evidences. Most of the times, audit evidences collected by these are contradicted by the ones collected by the method of inquiry. So, inquiry holds a very crucial part throughout the audit procedure. Lastly, we have analytical procedures, which is nothing but the recalculating thing, the arriving at the ratios, and then using his judgments and his knowledge about the industries and concluding upon the financials. So these were some of the methods through which the audit evidences are collected and the conclusion about the financials are drawn upon. Thank you.